Golden Spiral Media presents The Blacklist Exposed.
You can be her guardian angel, or you can listen to the award-nominated Blacklist Exposed podcast. I am Agent Troy Heinrichs.
And I am Agent Aram Peterson, doing push-ups right now, Troy, as we record this episode. Thanks to Blacklist for making me feel really out of shape. And also thanks to you guys for joining us as we discuss number 7 on the Blacklist, Jacked Up Tom Keene, which aired March 19th, 2015. It was written by Lucas Reeder and J.R. Orsi. And it was directed by Andrew McCarthy. Again, reteaming with the Spader. Show notes and other intel for this episode of The Blacklist Exposed can be found at goldenspiralmedia.com/theblacklist. And before we get started, we do want to mention one last time, you can vote for The Blacklist Exposed and Best Entertainment at podcastawards.com every day until the end of day, March 24th. And also The Hollywood Outsider, which is a show I do for best movies and films. You want more details? They are available at goldenspiralmedia.com.
Now, we asked you last week to answer our profiling question for the major. We wanted to know, who do you think the judge works for?
And you guys had some really interesting theories. Tanya says he works for us, the people, the ones who do not think the government should have the right to spy on us, the people who think the government should not hide behind the Patriot Act. She thinks he's on the up and up. What do you think?
After this week's episode, I would agree. After last week's episode, I would totally disagree. So I think it depends on when they answer the question.
I think he's kind of a big baby. That's what I think. I think he works for the Criers National League.
I want to be on the Supreme Court. Why won't I get to be on the Supreme Court?
I'm sick of the government getting in the middle of stuff. By the way, I'm going to totally do what the government says. Amy says, I originally thought he worked for someone, but not so much now. I think he's just someone who wants to take down government corruption to make a name for himself. He has little man syndrome. That's awesome. I totally agree. Lisa says he works for the people who want the fulcrum. Oh.
Like the Alliance, or some different people that want the fulcrum to expose the Alliance?
At this point, doesn't everybody want the fulcrum?
I guess so.
Jim says, I still believe that the judge works for the major. Oh.
He's a plant.
That's an interesting theory.
That is an interesting theory. I don't know how that plays out, but yeah, I like it.
Well, things always come back around. That judge, I don't think is done. I don't think he's done. And Carol says, I now believe that he is not working for anyone, but I think he will be a problem in the future.
That's the best answer, I think, because the way the whole Tom Connolly situation with him looked like they had some history, and Tom seems to be a little bit more of a presence now. So I think that definitely will come back.
And I like the fact that we have a couple players that aren't deep-seated into this conspiracy that are becoming a problem for everybody. Regular people.
Average Joes. Well, if you want to answer the profiling question of the week and get in on the fun, head on over to the Facebook group and search for The Blacklist Exposed. Join us there. Have some fun discussion, because this week we want to know, how did you interpret the meaning behind Red's speech to Liz at the end of the episode? We'll discuss that and more as we break down this week's episode case profile.
To those new to the show, this is where we discuss the basic synopsis of the episode. We'll discuss the main case at hand, and then we'll break down each character. It's how we do it on this show. This week, Liz is up for murder charges, and Red and Ressler set out to bring back the elusive Tom Keene, who's now apparently working for an Aryan drug cartel. No longer under the guise of a teacher, Tom is now like a thunder-bringing badass of the Steven Seagal variety. He's just breaking legs and taking names. What did you think about this little introduction? I mean, I realize they want to establish Tom as, man, he's kind of tough now, but he's got the tattoos, the shaved head, the Aryan Nation affiliation, the push-ups. He snaps a leg. I didn't say you get to walk away. What did you think about this reintroduction of the character?
Well, technically, if he's going to be part of this Aryan Nation drug cartel, he doesn't fit in because he has black hair, right? Weren't they supposed to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed?
I don't think anybody had blonde hair in that entire cartel.
Just something to point out, just saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like the opening sequence where the guy was like, you said you let me live and walk away. And he said, I didn't say anything about walking away, and then busted his kneecaps.
It was great, and didn't even do it slightly. I mean, I thought the leg was going to pop off.
I know.
Well, one thing that happened because of this and during this case was the post office, Keene's underground government organization, is now fully aware of Keene's existence. Do you think as this goes forward, it's going to change how some of the characters like Samar and Aram look at her?
I would think it would have to, because if she was doing all this stuff on the DL, supposedly because we had to find Berlin, I had to avenge Myrna's death. I had to make sure someone paid for putting you in the hospital. But they did that without any help. And she came to Ressler, but she never came to the others. I think that might divide the post office a little bit as we move forward for the rest of season 2.
You think Liz telling Ressler but not telling everybody else about this is going to keep them separated?
Well, the hard part is that technically Ressler is her partner, even though it hasn't seemed that way in the last couple episodes. We get that correction this week finally. So they could pass it off that way, like you trusted your partner and we'll let it go. Or they could say, hey, we're all a team. Why didn't you tell us too? So I could see it going either way, which is like the Blacklist likes to do to us. You get 2 answers for every question.
That's true. But I want to point out, and I've been going back and forth with some of our listeners about this. You know, some people think that you don't get the answers in the show. I think you get answers every week. They just pose new questions. I really don't feel like the show is like Lost, where they drag one question out over an entire 5 seasons or something. I think that when they introduce something, most of the time it gets answered rather quickly. And I will stick to that because that's how I feel. So Red uses several informants and tracks Keene down through some very bad German accents. I got to point out, I love the show. The German accents were not well done.
Not at all. Not last week, not this week.
No. Find a new dialect coach because it is not working. Red ends up completely blowing his cover in order to get him back. Do you think the Major is going to retaliate?
That's a really good question because Red and the Major had an understanding that he would let the Major live, but at the same time, the Major has got a business to run himself. So I would say that we have not seen the end of this Iranian drug cartel situation, even though most of them were taken out. I think all of them were. But I know that one guy went in the back room, the kind of older gentleman, and he might still be in play. So, yeah, I definitely think that the Major and Tom will resurface at some point.
Okay. Well, we've got a lot more detail as the show goes on. We're just kind of breaking down what happened in the episode right now. After he said, I'm not going to help, Liz is on her own. Completely selfish and what we would expect from Tom Keene at this point, right? He then strolls in and confesses, which also makes things a little bit worse for Liz because she told the judge that he was dead. The judge isn't even swayed by this confession. I mean, do you think this was a bad move on her part? Like, she should have just told the judge he really escaped?
Well, I mean, at the same time, you could play it off of, I thought he was dead, and then I showed up at the boat and saw him there, and I was like more of the shock kind of thing, like the whole, I'm criminally insane, so you can't put me in jail for something I didn't know I was doing. Mm-hmm. Maybe she could have played it off as, I was in shock. I didn't realize who he was because he's supposed to be dead. And then I fired a weapon because I was, distraught and I tripped over something and accidentally hit Sam. So there's plausibility to like completely unperjure herself in that entire situation. Because for all intents and purposes, we all thought he was dead too until we saw him in the boat. So it could play off.
I never thought he was dead. No. So who's we all? Because I'm not including myself in that list. So maybe some people, but if you've ever watched a television show, if I don't see a gaping wound, you ain't dead. And
in this show, I don't assume you're dead unless Mr. Kaplan is putting you in the ground.
That's a good call. And we actually want to see your face like in the cloth as they bury you. I don't want to, you're all wrapped up and we don't see the, nah, I need to see body parts. Facial reconstruction does not count either. It all works out and Tom Keene is completely irrelevant as Tommy Connolly is the reason that Liz gets to walk. My opinion, that's the way that I took it. I'm watching the show, and even though it's a great episode, I think we got a ton of good stuff to talk about, which we're going to in a second. It really felt to me like the whole Tom Keene thing was completely irrelevant. Am I wrong?
Yeah, because if Tom Connolly could have come down and just wiped it all under the rug in the first place, then why did Keene ever need to resurface? And then the fact that Keene ends up being on the blacklist at number 7 of all things tells me that what we think of the blacklist as being some kind of like criminal mastermind organizations that we need to take down, it isn't that at all. It's really whoever Red feels like putting on every given week.
Well, I think Red has a complete list, right? I mean, based on the fact that we see numbers and names and whatnot, and seeing Tom so near the top, I think that means he is one of the top of his list. But the fact that he got to walk at the end confuses me. What did you take from that?
I'm sure it was probably some deal. Like Red always makes deals. And the deal, I think, was that if you were able to come in and confess and help me save Lizzie, then I'll help you disappear again. And the fact that Tom Connolly was also involved in making that happen now makes me question if Tom and Red have been working together the whole time. And Red's been kind of positioning Tom into his place of leadership.
Well, I think to get him to come back into that courtroom to confess, there's a lot of time where we don't see Red. Ressler's back in the post office. He's back to work. He's all bummed because he couldn't bring him back. And then there's a period of time that passes where you don't see Red. You don't see Keen. My interpretation of that would be Red worked something out because Keen was extremely adamant that that's her problem. She's on her own. And then all of a sudden he's all like, hey, can I help you out, Liz? I'm going to show up in court and confess.
Well, in that whole sequence when Revan was talking to the judge, hey, can you just hold off until the AG's representative comes down from the office? Is Tom Keen that representative, or was Tom Connolly the representative just coming much later? That's the interesting part, like who was talking to who in the hallway before Tom Keen showed up.
That's a good point. Good point. Well, now let's break down the individual characters. This is where we get into the real detail that we got from the episode. There's a couple of characters, didn't do a lot, but they still had a little bit here and there. Samar, I think she's got a pretty twisted sense of what's romantic because of the whole Tom Keen thing. She said during the episode, I find it romantic.
I mean, this is her being a little, what would you call it, twisted?
That's what I did call it.
Aram's in for a party if she ever gives in.
I think Aram should maybe start hooking up with some kind of dating site. This woman is dangerous. She's going to lead to your downfall. And she does get all up in Ressler's face a little bit. Like when he comes back, she's right up at his door saying, so you couldn't get it done. I thought that was actually pretty bold.
Well, yeah, that's the only part of this episode that I thought was weird.
How's that?
They're talking to him on the phone, and he chucks the phone, and he's all pissed off back in the apartment in Germany as they're driving away. And then Ressler comes back. Ressler doesn't seem like the guy who would not come back without the man. So that leads me to believe that there was something brokered before Ressler made it back to the States and back into his office. Because he just kind of nonchalantly put it off, like, stop talking to me about it, I got my man. It's just coming later.
You think Ressler was aware of a deal?
I would assume so. He's been in on the whole Harbor Master helping Liz the whole time, so why wouldn't Red clue him in to kind of keep the ruse going?
Okay. Interesting. I don't think Ressler was in on it. He just looked bummed to me. I mean, he looked like he failed when he got back. For me, it's something that Red and Keen worked out. I really didn't think that he was involved at all.
Well, then you could take it that the show is giving you the two answer option, right? Because then Ressler would be bummed because he's like, Reddington eluded me once again. Gosh darn it. I hate that guy.
I would have got away with it if it wasn't for those meddling kids. Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll get to Ressler in a minute. Aram, wouldn't you know that he's the one guy that's going to send a get well bitch card? Which, can you pick those up at any particular store?
I laughed so hard when that card came out. I was like, we got some partying to do.
He is the ultimate comic relief. I really wish he was part of the show more, because every time he's on, I smile a little bit. It's not dark and dour and sad. It's always, man, Ram, you just made my day better a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah. But unfortunately, that's really all he did. This whole episode is you pretty much picked up a card and gave little facial expressions to Ressler's plan. Dembe, this guy is so bad. I got to point this out. There's a shootout, right? Remember the shootout?
Yep, the shootout when he's with the Iranian drug cartel, and Tom's like, these guys put it up to the, then all of a sudden the guns start flying.
Guns are flying everywhere. Everybody's shooting. Red ducks behind an SUV. Keen's taking cover. Dembe is so badass, he doesn't even bother with it. He's just shooting people right out in the open. Just, hey, what's up? Boom. What's up? Boom. I love Dembe. Even though he didn't do anything except shoot people this episode, it was great because the whole time I'm watching it going, this dude's like Jack Bauer.
I would even go as far as I'd like to see him play Rambo or Commando from the 80s just to see what Dembe would look like with a rocket launcher on his side.
I think he'd just walk up and start shooting, man. That was my favorite part of the episode. I even had to rewind it and go to my wife. Look at that. He isn't even trying to get cut. He's not concerned at all. He's just got that look on his face like, yeah, you ain't going to hit me.
And that was prevalent because I screamed at the TV. I was like, Tempe, get down.
It's so good. Ressler. Okay, we're coming back to Ressler. He demands on going with Red to bring back Keen to help his partner. And unfortunately, it appears one way that he wasn't able to get much done, and appears another way that you think he might have worked something out.
What I really loved about this scene was the whole conversation about, you can't come, Donald. You look like a cop. You smell like a cop. And then they're having this conversation in the warehouse with the cartel. And he's like, and Tom's like, this guy's a cop. And he's like, I am a cop. I was like, wait, what? Why did he just say that? And then it all played out the way it did. I thought it was brilliant writing. It was so funny.
Yeah, I totally did not see. I thought for sure he was going to get shot. Or it was going to be one of those manufactured conflict issues. I'm glad that he used that to his advantage. Are you surprised that Red let him come?
No, I think he was going to have Donald come no matter what. He just wanted to make sure that he proved his point to Donald before they teamed up. There's a special bond between the two of those ever since being chased by Donald, and then, of course, sharing that intimate experience in the box in Ansel Garrick. So I think he respects Donald now, and he just wanted to find out what Donald's true motives were for coming before leaning him in on the conversation and what was going to go down next.
And what I took from that is he showed during this episode that he really has Liz's loyalty at heart. Like, he's very loyal to Liz, and he respects her as his partner, and he's going to do anything he can to help his partner. Do you agree with that? Or do you think, because you think everybody has an ulterior motive, do you think he has some kind of ulterior motive to keep her free?
No, I still say Ressler's like our Wilcox for the post office. He's still the honest lawman. Granted, he did some stuff that isn't really honest, but he's still as honest as he can be, more honest than others.
What the hell does that mean?
Well,
he's as honest as he can be.
Well, you said he wasn't really that honest because
he's not. He. I mean, he's still a good guy, but he broke some rules. So, I mean, you can't be as good as you were once you've done that. You know, once you cross a certain line, you've crossed that line. Right,
but he's probably the most still upstanding for the whole team. He's the best of the worst.
I'd say Cooper. Well, he's kind of crossed the line too. Crap. There's no one left. They're all dirty. Aram's all we've got. That's what I'm saying. I'm not Ressler Aram.
No, because he helped out Red. Got him stuff without the warrant.
Man. God, they're all shades of gray.
Which is what the whole judge's point was. Government's corrupt.
So sad. All right, well, speaking of righteousness, Wilcox, that is the cop that was investigating Liz, and he brought the charges, and he's been very prominent the last several episodes throughout the season, but really the last few episodes. And it really felt to me like at the end of the episode, he's going to stop at nothing to win this battle, to get justice for the harbor master. Do you think that this righteousness is going to cost him his life ultimately, or are we done with him on the show?
Initially, I would have said that it's going to cost him his life and that he's going to keep pursuing it. Mm-hmm. And then I saw the last sequence with Liz and Red, and I said, okay, this whole thing was to make a point by the writers about the whole, you have to answer for your choices, you have to answer for your questions, and you have to answer for the actions you take. And that point came clear because then, of course, we got the sermon at the end of the episode from Red. I think that's all this was trying to do. I don't think we'll see Wilcox again.
Clarify what you mean. I don't know what you
mean. So
mean.
Wilcox has that, conversation with Liz as they're leaving the courtroom. It's like, I have to go out there now and tell this guy's wife what you did and that we didn't get her justice. And then you compare that with Red's conversations about the Mexican fish and will I recognize the good when it comes because I've done so much bad. I think it's all trying to prove a point that Red in some way is a good character yet flawed. Liz is becoming that character yet flawed. And it's just to prove that point and send that message home because it's like hitting you with a 2x4. You see it here and then you get the reiteration of it in the final sequence. And I think that's all this was trying to drive was that point. There are good people in the world, and when bad people do bad things, they have to live with those decisions. And it just eats away at you as a human being. And can you ever come back to the good side when you go down that path?
Yeah, I think he's going to come back up. I don't think he's done. So I'm going to, probably out of spite, just disagree with you. And because that's what we do on the show. I honestly think that he's not done. It seems like he really has a mission to get Liz at some point. And I think he's going to come back up. Plus, he's a good character. I actually don't want him to go away.
Wouldn't it be interesting to see Wilcox and the judge? Because Wilcox was like so pissed off at him. He's like, I can't believe you do this in your own court. What the heck's your problem? Blah, blah, blah. I still don't understand why the judge didn't hold him in contempt. But it would be interesting to see the judge and Wilcox team up to go after Connolly some way, somehow.
Like go on a wacky buddy cop adventure?
Totally.
Okay. Which one's Eddie Murphy? That's what I want to know. The judge, speaking of the judge, Judge Denner is a total weasel. We decided on Twitter that we were going to refer to him as Judge Assface. And he's the guy that he's just slimy. I mean, I know it's a hard thing because I think he has good intentions, or it seems that way at certain points. But he's so slimy about it. Now, do you think he's actually kind of a Weasley character, or it's just because he's going against the characters we love, even though we know they're kind of in the wrong?
Well, I guess it goes to how much backstory is there between Renner and Connolly? It seemed like they had some feud growing up over the years. Maybe they were in law school together, because he even has that, Smiley Tom Connolly nickname for him. And I wouldn't say he's a weasel in the sense he's just doing his job, but I'd like a lawyer or someone in the federal circuit court to maybe explain what is jurisdiction, what isn't jurisdiction, because Connolly makes that point of, you're just a circuit judge. What the hell do you have, asking these questions? Even though technically it was a municipal case, I guess, because it was a Metro PD officer that got shot down. Mm-hmm. And I just want to see if that is kosher, copacetic. Did that make sense? Or was that just written for convenience? I think he's just doing his job, and he's really trying to make sure it's good for the American people. As you watch this second episode with him, he's even frustrated at the end. He's like, I can't believe you people busted my courtroom. You disrespect me. Don't even stand up. Don't even give me the honor that I'm deserved. But it is national security, so you're free to go.
He feels totally like the kid that stomps his feet. I'm taking my toys and going home. That's really what I got from his character.
Wouldn't you do that? I mean, this is your courtroom. This is your career and the life that you've set up, and you've basically been, kneecapped. Would
I pout? No, I wouldn't pout. I would do whatever I had to do, and then I would spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. That's what I would do.
Which I think is why we're going to see the judge again. I don't know if we'll see Wilcox again, but I'm sure we'll see the judge again with Tom Connolly in that situation, trying to get revenge.
Now, did you kind of get the feeling that the judge really doesn't have a whole lot of power when a guy totally unrelated comes in and just hands him his balls? For lack of a better term, that's really what happened. He just walked in and said, you don't have any right, man. You got no right.
Well, and then I loved how he rubbed it into him, too, as Connolly's walking out. Hey, I'm on my way to be the AG. It's like, suck it, dude. You lost.
It's like a government OG. That's what that is. Well, Tom Connolly. We finally have a full name for Cooper's ominous boss. We only knew him as Tom before. Turns out he is basically a reformed Boondock Saint or something, because there's lots of history with everybody. His tirade on the judge, which I want to reiterate, I'm pretty sure I said this last week, that he had no legal recourse for everything the judge was doing. For me, that was the high point of the episode. When he is telling him everything that he's doing is against so many, it's a violation of so many acts. It's ridiculous. And he finally put him in his place. He put the judge in his place. So now I ask you, now that you've had this, are you a fan of Tom Connolly, or do you still think you're an evil SOB?
I like Tom Connolly from the beginning, especially because they had that kind of toasting, best ships or friendships conversation with Cooper. He seems like a normal, decent guy. He has this conversation, which tells me that he's working on the good of the task force, which is okay. But then he walks out of Cooper's office at the end, and he does the, now I've got something to hold over your head. Wink, wink, just kidding.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, wait, what? Is he really going to do what we think he's going to do? And he's really going to use the task force for his own personal game to become the AG?
Absolutely.
Which then tells me, does he need to be the AG to get his seat with the clandestine group?
Oh, is he really working that alternate angle?
Could be.
My bigger question was, is he in Red's pocket? Because he made Tom disappear. Like, hey, Keen never returned himself in. Don't know what you're talking about, Liz. Haha. Do you think that's the government related, or do you think that's because he's on Red's payroll?
That's a good question, too. Not sure.
What's your verdict? What do you think?
I'm going to say he's with the clandestine group, so I can disagree with you.
Yeah, I think he's on Red's payroll. Definitely. I do. It just seemed awfully convenient that he showed up right after Keen turned himself in, and I just think that. And I'm a fan of his too. I'm actually, after his tirade, I'm really a big fan. I'm like, hey, even if he is evil, he's cool evil, so I can deal with that.
Yeah, I really liked his character this week. It was very dynamic, very interesting. And then he's even like, hey, Wilcox, move along. We're done here.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted last week. Like, I wanted anybody to come in and just tell the judge, you can't do this because it's against the law. And honestly, our fearless federal officer should have known that, but that's neither here nor there. Cooper, his tirade before he collapsed, where he's saying he doesn't recognize Liz anymore, he doesn't recognize himself. For me, that was everything we love about Cooper in one speech. Did you think he was going to die this episode?
If they killed him off this episode, I would have been mad because it was a really wimpy way to kill him off. I think he's got to go down guns blazing in the field, like when he was captured by the original judge, the blacklister, or getting strangled in the car at the end of the season 1. So I'm glad they did not kill him off in this episode, and that it actually was, it's just a reaction to the medication you're taking from the clinical trial. It's not even about your tumor. And by the way, the tumor's shrinking. So that leads us into some fan feedback we're going to have a little bit later. But then at the same time, we have the standard flip-flop Cooper, because when he's in the hospital, he's like, don't worry about it, Liz. It's okay. You were doing what was right for the task force. Do
you think ultimately that tirade was just because of the medication? It wasn't because he's really thinking that?
That was my first inclination. Like maybe something was happening, like a side effect, like because of he's on these meds and he had the nosebleed, and maybe something was just in his brain that caused him to just spew, where he might not have had, kind of like when you have, like ADHD or something like that. You get so hyper-focused and you can't control what you're really saying. And so maybe he was just out of balance at that point, and all of his feelings were on the outside versus being calculated and protected in his conversations. So it could be a side effect. But at the same time, it felt real. It felt very emotional. And like he was really like a dad, like a father figure. Like I raised you, I took care of you. Why did you do this to me? And now I'm doing this myself. Because he seems to me like he is an honorable man, and that he did perjure himself for her. So I think at the end of the day, Cooper is a good guy and he has good morals. In this case, he was looking out for himself to protect his feelings about Liz.
I really think it was legitimate. I believe this was festering in him for a while, and I was actually surprised it took this long for him to blow up on her. I'm glad they had that conversation, though. I was really at a loss last week as to why he flipped on what he was going to do. And so he felt like he was put in a position where he had no choice but to lie. And the fact that he explained that to the audience was really important to me as a viewer, because I really wasn't buying it last week. I mean, even though I was like, okay, all right, he did what we didn't expect him to do. But at the end of it, it's really hard for me to swallow that he would do that as a character. So this week, that really helped me as a viewer go, okay, all right, now I understand where the character's coming from. Liz and he made up, which is good because you need that to happen. And like I said earlier, I mean, the show doesn't take very long to resolve issues and move on to the next thing. So we don't usually have a lot of things that play out over episodes and, seasons. Most of this stuff is resolved rather quickly. But Liz admits that he is the only person that she really trusts. I was actually kind of surprised by that. I really thought, she maybe Ressler as well, and she's got a couple other people in her life, obviously not Red. But I was kind of surprised that she plainly stated, "You're the only person I trust."
Did she say you're the only person or one of the only people?
No, she said you're the only person I really trust.
Okay. Because that would be a lie then, because she does trust Ressler. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let Ressler in on the Tom and the boat and the harbor master and all that jazz. I guess you could say level of trust then. She trusts Ressler, but she really trusts Cooper.
Well, I think she said completely. So maybe that's, she's a little hesitant about some things to do with Ressler, but when it comes to Cooper, she has no doubts about his loyalties.
I trust Ressler as long as he's sober.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly, his talk with Connolly at the end, which he talked about a little bit, but it really comes across as mutual admiration until that last comment where he's like, "Hey, by the way, I got something on you." But I do like that they both kind of explain where they are in their situations, and Cooper admits that there's a little gray area in his principles, and Tom Connolly saying, "I don't have any." I thought that was a nice conversation, and it didn't turn horribly duplicitous.
I really liked Tom's thing of, I know a lot more that I wish I didn't know. So it seems like he might be a decent person because he had that comment. But then at the same time, he twisted at the end with now I got something to hold over your head.
Okay.
Just like Bokenkamp to put something like that in the show.
We didn't need another Tom, by the way. So we're going to have to refer to him as Tommy because otherwise it's going to confuse everybody that's listening.
Smiley Tommy Connolly.
There you go. Tommy Connolly. Liz. Now we're going to talk about Tom in a second. Liz actually goes third this week. So third from the top. He'll go to prison for the rest of his life because of me. That's a statement she said during the course of the show. Tom's going to go to prison for the rest of his life because of her. What? That drove me insane. That seems like young smitten love. It's all my fault. What? He's a freaking psycho. It's not your fault.
Well, it's like that syndrome that you fall in love with your captor, right? In this case, Red put Tom into Liz's life. Tom flipped because of Berlin, because of Red. So at the end of the day, the statement is true. Tom is going to go to prison because of Liz. It's just not for the reasons Liz thinks that he's going to go to prison. There's
a dual thing going on with this. There's a dual perspective from my point of view. Is that in one instance, that sentence infuriates me. In another sentence, it makes total sense. It infuriates me because why would anybody think that? But then you look at the flip side, which is, she spent a large portion of her adult life with this man, and she loved this man regardless of what he turned out to be. So I would see in somebody's mind how they could see that. It seems very realistic in this situation, even though it's a very unrealistic situation.
Well, plus she says that right after Red has that long conversation with her.
Mm-hmm.
So
one thing we found out throughout the episode is, at the beginning, she's talking about closing an account and having money transferred today. At the end of the episode, we learned that it's for a scholarship for Ames's daughter. What did you think about her setting up a scholarship, like taking care of Ames's daughter? I mean, it shows that Lizzie has compassion for what her actions brought.
I really liked it, actually. I think it would have been better if it would have been on behalf of the entire post office rather than just Liz, because then it shows Liz might be guilty in her actions. If she was really doing all of this because she wanted to get to Berlin for the good of the task force, then the task force should have set up the scholarship, not just Liz. By doing this herself, it kind of admits, hey, I wasn't quite doing this because of the task force. I was really doing this because I wanted to get back at Tom. My opinion.
Okay. Interesting. I like that we have characters that are willing to make amends for their actions. Any show that does that makes me feel a little better about the character. So you also had Cooper's wife, Charlene. Is that her name, Charlene, I believe? Mm-hmm. And Liz, they have a nice little moving moment where she learns of his tumor. During the conversation, Liz makes a look like she realized Cooper got into the trial under shady pretenses. Am I wrong? Did you see that? Did you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like there's like a little look when she hears about he got into this trial we never thought he'd get into. And she makes this look like, huh. Do you think that's going to come back into play?
Again, you could look at it two ways. You could look at it as that way, or you could look at it as I'm acting because I didn't know you had a tumor.
I totally think she realized that second Cooper had to do something to get that trial.
Well, and then she probably thought that it was Red behind it, and then she doesn't even know. So here she's back in the dark again.
I don't know. I think that little look is going to come back into play. Just something I observed. I can probably just out of my depth, but it is what it is. All right. That's really all we got with Liz, except, she's, right? Is she finally off the hook, or are we going to come back to this storyline?
No, the Harbor Master thing is done.
Well, I thought it was done like twice before. So are you sure this time?
I'm positive it's done this time. I didn't think it was done before. I knew someone was going to have to answer for it. There were too many people involved. Plus, Tom was involved, and they had to bring Tom back to the show. So, yeah, definitely done now.
Well, apparently you didn't really need Tom, but we already talked about that. Okay, Tom Keene leads us into Tom. Red says he and Tom share some propensities. It's not push-ups because we all know Red would have someone else do those for him. What do you think those propensities are? Just to be duplicitous, to be manipulative? What would you say are these shared propensities?
D, all of the above.
You're not even going to try and pick them out, right? You're just like, they are the same guy.
Yeah, he's crafty. He's able to play a situation for what it needs to be to get what job done that he needs to get done. He's criminal in a lot of ways, and he's also caring in a lot of ways, clearly because he comes back to help Liz out. So, yeah, Tom and Red are very similar in a lot of ways. And I think that's what he was trying to get across by saying, yep, they share some of these propensities.
Yeah. I also think one of the propensities he was talking about is an affection for Liz.
That could be too. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the things alluded to. It was a little slighter, but I think it was alluded to. Now, Keen, when he turns himself in, he seems to do so willingly. And we briefly touched on this earlier. So now we're going to kind of jump into it. Do you think he had assurances? So I guess my question is, was this a selfless act or a totally selfish act? Because right before he does that, before, Ressler goes back and everything else, he's very adamant. She's on her own. It's her problem. It's not my problem. And then shortly thereafter, strolls into the courtroom, says, I got to confess. My bad. What do you think?
I think the deal was already in place. Like you said, there was too much downtime that we didn't see a lot of these players. The AG's rep is coming down. Just give us a second. I really think Tom would not have walked into that courtroom unless he had a deal in place.
What do you think the deal's with? 'Cause I'm sitting here looking at it going, could be Red, could be AG, as you like to refer to him. It could, it could be a multitude of things. I think the deal was with Red.
Well, if it's with Red, then it had to have been with Tom Connolly also, because Tom Connolly's the one that got him out.
Yeah, well, my theory is that he's in Red's pocket. So there's like the circle of trust going on here. According to my theory.
So you're saying the circle of trust, Tom Connolly gets him off, Red now controls Tom again. So now Red's going to put Tom undercover to go take down the Major permanently?
Very possibly, yeah. I think there's a lot more pieces at play, and you have to wonder, are we going to, your question, are we going to see Tom again? Do you think we're going to see Tom again? And I think that's where all of this is going to come back around, where we end up seeing Tom again.
Well, and it's something that we talked about in season 1, back when the show was on TV Talk, was there's some blacklisters who never went to jail, or there's some blacklisters who were allowed to live. And would we ever see a repeat blacklister as the show progresses? Do we always have to have a new number every week?
What do you mean? Do we have to, like, for the blacklist?
Yeah, like, would we see the Major come up again in another episode? Or would we see Tom Keene come up again as number 7 in another episode?
Oh, would they just repeat that? That's a good question. See, I actually think sometimes when it doesn't really revolve around an actual blacklister, because it's happened once before, and I would say that this one isn't really a blacklist. But, I guess you can make the connections because he was hired by Red, and now he's on the list or whatever.
Yeah, it depends on how you define what the blacklist is.
Exactly. Yeah, the definition is really what determines that. But, I mean, obviously, if they're going to go back to the same character, they got to use the same number, right?
Absolutely.
They can't change that. Or can where they are on the list change as we go, like as they become more wanted or less wanted?
That's a really good point.
Like, could Tom, now that he's less of a threat or less of a necessary function, necessary ends to the means, could he go down the list? Could he be like 54 next time or something?
And because he took Tom out of this situation where he was in, could the Major now go up to be number 6 or 5 from 75?
There you go. Because I think those are both coming back into play. Obviously, Tom Keene is not done. I mean, he's going to come back in some fashion. And I'm of the mindset that it's going to have to do with Tommy, Donnelly, and Red, or it could just be a Liz component, because you get the call at the end with Tom and Lizzie where, he just wants to know if she's okay. Do you think that is still love, or is that manipulation?
Like you said, could go either way. I would assume it's love.
Would you? Why would you assume that, though?
Because they had that conversation in the boat where it seemed like they were kind of reconciling, but at the same time, you can't trust anything Tom says, so it's really hard to say love or not love, because you don't know, did he get a deal or did he not get a deal, and did he do it just because he wanted to do it? I mean, that's the best part of the show. You can literally rack your brain for hours, days, trying to make heads or tails of it, and then they come up with a whole third solution you didn't even think of. Love it. I love it.
I don't know, man. I totally think I think he cares about her. There's obviously some affection there, but I just can't shake the feeling. He's a manipulative bastard. I can't get past the fact that I think he's ultimately just keeping her in play for himself in some way. Whether that's romantically or whether that's for a future endeavor, I don't know. But I don't know. I'm skeptical. How's that? I'm skeptical.
And to go off that point, this is one of these genre television shows that I think really do the genre concept well, because at the end of the day, there are long-term questions, and you could be frustrated about it like you were with Lost and some of those other shows. But the manipulation factor on this show is what can make it a episode by episode, case by case, bad guy of the week thing to get the viewers that they need, but yet still play that genre concept off. I mean, the manipulation, like, everybody could have an ulterior motive, and the guessing and the thinking is what makes it the genre show versus the case by case show.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Good job. Good job.
Okay, Red. Finally, we're at Red. And we've got Red's speech. But before we get to this speech, he has this another speech at the beginning on intent. Is Connolly working for him, is my question. And I know I brought it up a couple times, but I want you to answer. What do you think? Is Connolly working for him?
I am not going to answer because there's a great fan feedback on this exact topic, and I think we should hold it for there.
Okay.
Because I'll just say this. I don't think Connolly is working for Red. Is that what you meant?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think Connolly is working for Red.
You don't think so. Okay. Well, Red has snitches everywhere. Turns out he's even got one in rehab. Who knew?
It's the first step to recovery, just admitting you have a problem.
So funny.
I couldn't turn myself into rehab myself, but I'm glad you did. Great line.
I like that line. Yeah, he's like, I'm still drinking. Which that in turn leads him to Hans Becker, who's basically a human pincushion, right? I mean, this guy is pierced everywhere. Like, he drinks water and he becomes like a shower head.
Right.
So
he referred to him as what, the most holy man in the world?
Yeah, that was great.
Literally the most holes ever.
Do you think that guy's going to come back, Hans Becker?
Nah, he's just one of those side guys, kind of like the lady who was the botanist with the Hellfire missiles that he needed to find in the family. It's just part of his network.
I don't know. This guy's a little bit more colorful. I kind of hope he comes back.
And so is Vargas, and we haven't seen him for a while.
Well, that's because they're doing the Pee Wee special, and Paul Rubens is busy. He's like, my career's back on fire. So, he's got to be 60 years old and play Pee Wee again. I don't know. I liked Hans Becker. It was an interesting character. Do you think that was makeup, or do you think it just went out and found a guy that was all pierced up?
I don't know. It was a really good job if it was makeup, or if it was a guy that's all pierced up. Good for him, because, man, that looks painful.
Yeah, that looked like it hurt. Okay, well, what we got. We've already talked about Red a lot throughout the episode and through the other characters. The biggest part of what we got from Red this week was the speech at the end. I'm going to mention some of the finer points of that speech, where Lizzie is sitting there watching Ames's daughter, right? And Red recognizes something in her, what she's doing. She's watching her. And his speech involves, he's talking about this is where that's going to lead to. You can watch her. You can have someone watch her. You can try to keep her safe. You can ascertain her hopes and desires. You can pull strings. You can call in favors. You can be an invisible benefactor. But ultimately, it's all a fraud. It's not about her at all. It's about you. You're just going through the motions to solve your guilt, what you took away from her. And my favorite line of the episode, everything else is just a nice gesture. Tell me what your interpretation of that is, because as the Blacklist masterfully does every single week, there's about 45 different variations you can take that.
Yeah, and that's why it's the profiling question of the week, because we want to hear your interpretation of it as well. For me, I took it as, because we're still assuming that Red is not the father, because Red doesn't lie to Liz, if we can believe all of that. So I'm going to stick with that side of the coin, and I'm going to say that whatever happened with the fire was directly related to this speech. Somehow, Red did something to Liz's life, and because of that, he's been trying to make up for that ever since, because he owes a debt to somebody else. Whether that's Red's father, because he got Liz's father killed, the real father, not Sam, even though he probably killed both, because he did kill Sam. So either he's trying to make up for that because he got Liz's father killed or Liz's mother killed. That's how I took it. He's trying to make up for Liz not having a family growing up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got too. And I think some of the confusion for me is, just the lines that he uses. I mean, obviously he's alluding to the fact that he's been watching over her whole life, right? He's been there her whole life. The question becomes, in what capacity? I mean, that's really what the question becomes. In what capacity? And, when he says it's all a fraud, what is he alluding to? Does he mean he's all a fraud, or just him caring about her when he shouldn't because maybe he's responsible for how her life ended up? Not necessarily in a fatherly sense, but like in someone who, I'm the reason all the people you love are dead, something along those lines. He said it's not about her at all. It's about you, your guilt. Does he feel guilty for leaving her? Does he feel guilty for killing her real father? It actually poses more questions than we already had, right? I mean, it kind of felt like last week Dembe tells him, you got to tell her. You got to tell her. And I feel like this is kind of what he's trying to do, but he's not doing it clear enough obviously for the audience to really know exactly what he means.
Well, in the fraud piece, I think he's talking about the fraud is the deluding yourself that you're doing something good when really you're doing something to make it right for you. That was the clear intention. So the fraud is the act. You're doing what you're doing is fraudulent because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But yeah, it was a really great speech, and I love the music that was in the background too.
Yeah, and everything can go so many different ways. I mean, the guilt thing, to solve your own guilt. So we know he feels guilty about what he took away from her.
Or what he wasn't able to provide for her because he had to leave her life.
There you go. There's a multiple ways you can take this. And I really like how they wrote this speech. I like how James Spader performed the speech. It was done in an exceptional way because it gives you a little bit of feeling for, okay, we kind of get where he's coming from a little bit more solidly than we have before. We've always had this, is it in a good way? Is it a manipulative way? Is it an evil way? And I think the speech helps, number one, prove that your theory is dumb. And
oh, no. My theory still holds true, because if you can say that Red doesn't lie to Liz and said, no, I am not your father in Ansel Garrick at the end, and then he gives this speech of, I wish I could have been there for you, but I had to go on the run because these people were going to kill me, and so I've been trying to make it up to you ever since, my theory could still hold true.
That he's still doing it in a manipulative capacity?
No, that he's doing it from a motherly capacity.
Oh, okay. We had some listener wrote in and said, not the mother. Stop it. I don't remember who that was, but thank you. I actually meant in terms of you say consistently that you think he's ultimately doing all this for his own reasoning. Do you still hold to that theory when you hear this speech? Do you still think that he's ultimately being duplicitous and evil and manipulative? Or do you think he is those things, but he really does care about her and she's the priority?
I'll answer that with his own statement. We have the same propensity as me and Tom. Do you think that Tom's call to her to say, was it an I love you call, or was it a manipulation call? Is this the same thing? Is Red manipulating her by playing into her sense of weakness and what she wants to hear?
So you're basically putting my own point of view against me. That's what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right, it's very sly.
I learned from the best, Mr. Reddington himself.
I like it. That is a speech that I think is going to be deciphered for a long time from fans of the show. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it. I thought it was something that was needed because it kind of gives you some answers without really answering anything. But it does give you, it puts you on a more even track with the characters, I guess, is kind of what I got from it. And Spader gave the right emotion for that speech. Just did a wonderful job.
So 1 to 10 this week. What did you think of the episode?
Oh, 1 to 10 for the episode? I got to go 9, man. I was really enthralled with it. And not so much because of like what happened. It was the little details that we got. It was little minute details that we got for various characters, how they approached certain situations and answered certain things, which we've talked, ad nauseum about. I really, really love this episode. What about you?
Yeah, I was going to go 9 as well. I mean, we watched the show twice, obviously, for the podcast to do you guys the service that we're bringing to you. but this was the first time where I didn't delete it off the DVR because I usually watch it a second time on Hulu or NBC.com or whatever. I left it on the DVR because I actually wanted to watch this a second time because it was so good.
Yeah, very, very much. And it moved at a quick pace. Everybody got a little bit of a moment. I mean, realize there's a lot of characters. They're not going to get moments every week, but everybody got a little bit of moment. And everybody got a little bit of substance, and for me, that's what makes a complete Blacklist episode. I really feel like the show is ramping up. Now that we have the AIM storyline behind us, I'm really curious, where do you think we're going to go? Because I don't watch previews for the upcoming episodes, so I have no idea where we're going next week.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Well, hang tight, bitch, because we got a lot more show for you.
That's funny.
Yeah, we want to take a few minutes, though, to remind you that we did have a lot of interaction this week because of that speech on our Facebook group. So head on over to Facebook and search for the Blacklist Exposed up in the search bar and join in on the fun. Or, of course, you can join us on Twitter. We had a great time tweeting. Harry Lennox was involved this week, who plays Cooper. You can do that over at the Blacklist GSM and join in on the fun.
And remember, podcastawards.com. You can vote until the end of day, March 24th. We appreciate your vote. Support the Blacklist and Gold Spiral Media. We really appreciate it. Now let's get ready for our Special Agent Intel. But before we do that, it's time for Red's Rhetoric.
It's now time for Red's Rhetoric, that part of the show where we play two different parts of what we like to call Story Time with Red. You get to vote which you think is the best by posting in the Facebook group. Just search for the Blacklist Exposed, or by tweeting us at the Blacklist GSM with the appropriate hashtags. Last week, Red Suck won in a landslide. Nice job, Liz. That's 2 victories this season for you. You may just be turning into a mini Reddington yourself, after all. Our first clip this week comes when Red is talking to the holiest man in the world.
So it's ink now. My goodness, Franz. As if you hadn't found enough ways to decorate that pink hide of yours.
Hello, Red.
You know, Freud hypothesized that tattoos are a defense mechanism, a way of externalizing some internal trauma. So tell me, what secret pain are you hiding beneath that already crowded exterior?
Dude, I just like tattoos.
I thought perhaps it had something to do with that recent snafu at the airport. I heard about what happened with your shipment.
Geben Sie einen Sekunde. What do you want, Red?
A quiet place next to a lovely stream where I can watch things float by. Someday.
Our second clip is the fantastic scene at the end of the show with Red and Liz.
Now I understand why you sold the apartment I gave you.
Eugene Ames was 67 years old. The only reason he was still working was to get his daughter through college.
Be careful, Lizzie. Because the truth of it is, once you start down this road, there's no logical place to stop. You could see to her education, health insurance, housing. You could watch her. Or have her watched. Keep her safe. Try to ascertain her hopes, dreams, desires. Pull strings, call in favors to discreetly smooth the path. And for the first few years, it may work. You'll draw some measure of virtue from being her invisible benefactor. But that won't last. It's all a fraud. That it's really not about her at all. That it's all about you. And you're just going through the motions to salve your own guilt. But all the money, all the time and effort, all the favors in the world cannot possibly equal what you took away from her. Everything else is just a nice gesture.
Which was your favorite line this week? post to the Facebook group or tweet us at the Blacklist GSM with Red Pinhead if you are into that sort of thing, or Red Angel if you enjoyed Red's Guardian speech to Liz.
Now let's move into Special Agent Intel. Doc H wanted to let you all know that NBC re-aired The Major with sound this time, so he was able to catch up. So between that episode and this, he wanted to point out a few things. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. Maybe Liz was a cultivated asset to, like Tom, different provenance, though. What do you think to that?
That's very interesting. I wonder if she's playing a game, and that's maybe where Connolly comes in. Maybe she's working for the Connolly side of things, and it's a third faction.
I like it. That's an interesting theory, and I love theories. Possibly. So he's got a list on maybe, possibly, probably. Possibly. The Blacklist is not a prioritized list of bad guys where number one is the worst. It seems like a chronological log as they each were being identified. I think most of the chat rooms and podcasts going have accepted the priority meme as fact when it isn't.
I never thought it was a bad guy to worst guy. I thought that like maybe in season 1 out of the get-go. But as soon as the Berlin saga wrapped, then it was clear that, oh, well, it's just how these people are affecting Red, as Liz pointed out, as she started to put the pieces together. So I think this is the impact on Red's life, not the impact in their criminal capability.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I think. It's Red's go-to list. This is a list of people I need taken away or of usefulness to me, how useful they are to me at that point. All right. Also on his list, probably Red. Oh, this is interesting. Red is not a criminal at all. He's a long-term undercover, like a mole or sleeper agent, that was credited with seemingly seditious ways 3 decades ago in order to infiltrate the various crime and power broker networks around the globe. Think about it. He was a military intelligence officer being groomed for an admiralship. He didn't go all evil and dark side of the force. He agreed to and was sent there by one of the secret executive committees we have seen in the past year. Bye-bye, Fitchy. Red's allegiance is loyal and true to Uncle Sam and Team USA. I'm not saying something didn't go awry along the way, where now he has to resurface and set things right on personal items, but he never lost devotion. Personal items he never lost devotion to, like Liz, her fake dad. I assume that means he thinks he's her real dad. A former wife. Think about the era where Reddington allegedly went sour. The end of the Cold War, Eastern Europe and Africa starting to open up. All kinds of balance of power situations as former Soviet bloc allies start selling their Russian-made weaponry to the highest bidder. All kinds of mafioso syndicates running pseudo-governments with corrupt politicians on their payroll, running the facade of the real government. That is directly up Red's military intel, counter-intel alley. And if he was a superstar in the intel field and was being groomed for a leadership role at the Pentagon, he might just be the only guy to send long-term deep undercover to project the believable appearances of a traitorous master criminal or the double, triple agent every bad guy wants on staff. By series end, we will see Red as Captain America, not Simon Legree, and that he has been playing a long, very long, mashup game of Strategio, Risk, and Chinese checkers on a 5-tier Star Trek-style chessboard.
That's a well-thought-out theory.
That is a theory, my friend.
That goes to the answer you said of is Connolly working for Red? And so Doc says no, Red is working for Connolly.
I like it. There's a distinct possibility. So I like that you said probably and not definitely like Troy would. Suzanne, possible theory surrounding Cooper's brain tumor. Indulge me a little bit. Cooper really isn't sick at all. What? Is it possible Cooper was told he had a tumor? Told he had a tumor and would die soon for some other sinister reason. Perhaps to allow Tommy Connolly to blackmail Cooper by getting him in the cancer trial and then expecting Cooper to compromise his integrity as payback or loyalty for the favor, such as tipping off the guy who was about to be indicted like he did. If Cooper is indeed healthy, it certainly made him man up and protect his agents more than in the past. I also think back to Red knowing about Cooper's illness before he had told anyone. How would he know that? Or did Red know Tom Connolly was up to no good? I like that.
I like that too.
I like that. I would love to. Yeah, Cooper, you were never sick. What? Yep. True story.
Which is why the medicine's giving him side effects, because there's nothing there to play off of it.
It goes back to your side effect theory.
Well, because then he's in a government hospital, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the doctor could be like, hey, yeah, your tumor's shrinking. I saw the x-rays myself. Wink, wink.
Man, we just don't trust anybody on this show, do we?
Nope.
John said, well, this episode sure did wrap the story arc up with a nice bow. I think in this episode, Elizabeth starts to understand Red's role in her life. But what did Red strip away from Liz to make a ruthless guy like Red continue to support and protect Liz like he does? It's something that we definitely already talked about. It's a great question because we don't know. We're still trying to figure it out. Now Liz feels that same responsibility to the harbor master daughter. I love when Connolly came in and put Judge Renner in his place. I think it's Denner, isn't it?
Denner, yeah.
Yeah, it's Denner. I'm also glad that the judge doesn't seem to be part of a bigger plot. I say reserve that thought, John, because we don't know for sure on that one yet. The big question is now that all the cards are on the table, will there be any romantic relationship between Liz and Tom? That story is so hot, I can't see the writers leaving it alone. Oh, I think there's a romantic relationship. I mean, they are married, so technically it's already there, right?
There you go. John's thinking like a writer because the hot could mean two different things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think Tom and Liz work together in some capacity in the future to avoid the opportunity for some makeup. If that does happen, do you think there will be furniture broken like in the Tom versus Liz fight scene in season 1? Oh, he's thinking sexy Tom's going to get violent.
Hot.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's TV. It better.
Yeah. I think there will definitely be some reconnection between Liz and Tom. I'm going to say before the end of the season.
Absolutely.
Season 3, Liz and Tom team up to go after Red.
And get naughty in an elevator.
More than one. Just hope nobody's watching behind the fake wall of that elevator.
That's true.
Kate said, I think Tom Connolly is going to play a more key role in upcoming episodes. He has gotten Cooper into the clinical trial and now helped the task force out of this latest mess. He has told Cooper to keep in mind that he has helped him, the man of no principles. Will he climb into bed with Red? Or is he a member of the Alliance?
Good question. Good question. We've talked about that earlier. Still think he's on Red's payroll.
Yeah, I like the other theory. I think he's working for Red undercover or Connolly undercover.
Okay.
I do like that theory. That's a good one, Doc. And finally, Linda. She's our resident neuro nurse in real life, actually. And she said that I've dealt with brain tumors for years, and I am extremely interested in this tumor. I have to wonder about Cooper, what his role is in all of this chaos. They're making a really big thing of the brain tumor, which is a glioblastoma, which is always fatal. The only way not to die from one is to basically be run over by a truck first. And she said that the doctor's explanations were not right in this episode, which goes to maybe the tumor's fake.
So that's basically the only way out for her. It's like, it better be fake because all your medical diagnosis is crap.
Right. If she's a nurse, I'm going to believe her.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always trust nurses. My mom was a nurse. I trust nurses more than doctors. So thank you, Linda. That's going to conclude this episode. Be sure to follow us on Twitter this season at the Blacklist GSM. We usually live tweet during the East Coast feed. And we use the show's hashtag, The Blacklist. We also have a Facebook group. Just search for The Blacklist Exposed, and please join us for the fun. It's a good group.
But make sure if you do join us in the Facebook group, spoiler tags, just in case.
Yes, please spoiler tags. Just make sure to say spoilers are allowed or spoilers below, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we do have some people that are actually checking in from across the pond over in Europe, so they're about 4 days delayed. So just be careful when you're posting in there, please. Intel is exactly what we want from all of you, and we've been getting a lot of it through the Facebook group, so definitely check it out. But you can also submit intel into the agency a number of ways. Just look at the left-hand side of the page over at goldenspiralmedia.com/theblacklist. Lots of feedback methods, and we'd love to hear some voices, so use that send voicemail button.
You can also subscribe to the podcast in iTunes and Stitcher from the website as well, and find all the intel and analysis about this episode for Tom Keene. Again, visit goldenspiralmedia.com/theblacklist. Big thanks for listening. Don't forget to answer our profiling question of the week. How did you interpret the meaning behind Red's speech to Liz at the end?
Until next time, I'm Agent Troy Heinrichs. That's at Troy Heinrichs on Twitter. And if you want to learn more about me, just visit, about.me /Troy Heinrichs.
And I'm Agent Aaron Peterson. You can hear me talking about movies and TV on the also award-nominated Hollywood Outsider podcast, which is available at thehollywoodoutsiders.com. Or it's on Twitter at H_outsider, or Kaz_Peters is my personal Twitter, and I don't do much on that Twitter. Be sure to subscribe, submit your feedback, but most importantly, keep yourself off of
The Blacklist.
The Blacklist Exposed is a Golden Spiral Media production, copyright 2015. Find more of our great podcasts at goldenspiralmedia.com/podcasts.